Thank you very much, Phil, and good evening, everyone. Can we kill the music now? Thank you. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity to greet you this afternoon. I am reminded on occasions like this about a story called The Talking Dog. There's a man who discovers a dog that can talk, and he takes the dog around to various conventions like this one, showing the dog, and people are amazed. They don't care what the dog says. It's just the fact the dog can talk is very impressive. Sometimes I feel like I'm the talking dinosaur at these events. I'm going to try to cover three specific topics this evening very briefly, because I know many of you would like to get back to drinking and greeting and networking. First of all, let me draw to your attention the incomplete internet. Despite the fact that this system was designed in 1973 and became operational in 1983 and became commercially available about 1989, it still lacks many features that it needs. One of the most critical of those features is authentication. And every single one of you cares about the transactions that take place on the net, that are concerned about whether the devices you're talking to or the people whose email you're receiving or the systems with whom you are carrying on transactions are the right ones, should be deeply concerned about that technology. Even in simple cases like the domain name system, where we don't have yet digitally signed entries in the domain name system, it's possible to be misled on the network to get the wrong IP address for a lookup on the domain name system. There are some top-level domains today that are digitally signing the entries in the domain name zone files, and this would be an area where any of you who have responsibility for any portion of the government's domain name system could seriously give some thought to that. More generally, authentication isn't available on an end-to-end basis at all layers of the architecture. We're pretty good about building concrete tunnels, using simple SSL techniques. The trouble is, those generally don't identify the endpoints. They simply secure the channel. Securing the channel is not adequate. Generally, suppose that you have an email with an attached virus. You build an encrypted tunnel to send this email from one end of the net to the other. The virus goes along with it, thoroughly encrypted. Nobody can see it. It gets out the other end. It gets decrypted, and then, of course, it does its damage. So the solutions to many of these problems do not involve simply applying cryptography in one place in the net. It's going to have to be integrated into many different layers. Generally speaking, we have other security problems that need attention. The routing system, for example, can be easily confused. In fact, we occasionally, maybe even often, shoot ourselves in the foot by misconfiguring routing. But worse, it's possible to emit misleading routing information and cause traffic to go where it should not. On the other hand, if we have digitally signed entries that associate autonomous systems with specific IP address allocations, when routing updates occur, when announcements are made, you can double check to make sure the party making the announcement actually has the right to do that. The other example of the problem is email. Everybody understands that you can spoof the source of an email right now. We don't have a regular practice throughout the electronic mail system of finding ways to authenticate the origins of those emails, or for that matter, their content. I'm not arguing that these things don't exist. Of course, there are examples like PGP and so on, but they aren't uniformly in use, and that's something which we should be worried about on a national and international scale. And to the extent that the government can show leadership in this domain, it's something that I hope we all take into account. And the last obvious thing about security is malware. There's a lot of it out there. It causes a great deal of trouble. It's not easy to detect. Google does the best it can when we crawl the web to identify places where malware may be present on the website's HTML or XML files, but we don't always successfully detect that, and so some people are harmed. Of course, we do warn people when we detect malware, and we tell them, please don't go there if they happen to use our search engine to find places in the net. Some of them, after they get these interstitial pages, go there anyway. That we can't stop, but we do the best we can. Another example of incompleteness, let's take broadcast. We take broadcast radio channels and turn them into point-to-point links in the protocol architecture of the internet. Well, what we should be doing is augmenting that architecture so that we take advantage of the fact that a radio broadcast could be received by multiple parties. There aren't a set of protocols that take advantage of that today. What about mobility? We do a terrible job of serving up mobility, and yet more and more of the internet is being accessed by mobile devices, PDAs and mobile phones specifically. There are on the order of 4 billion of these devices in use today. About 15 to 20% of them are internet capable. More and more of them will be over time. We need to incorporate some serious protocol work in order to deal with that. And just to add to the list, of course, we all know we're running out of IPv4 address space. Somewhere around 2011, there will be no more to be allocated by the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. And when the next time an ISP goes to one of the regional internet registries and says, I need some more address space, the answer is there ain't no more left, unless you want IP version 6 addresses, of which there are a great many. Specifically 3.4 times 10 to the 38th of them, which is a number only the Congress can appreciate numbers on that scale. But it's vital that we get both V6 and V4 running in parallel. This is not a throw the switch kind of phenomenon, so we're going to have to work to get the ISPs to turn on V6 and V4 and to interconnect with each other using both of those protocols. I'm very proud to tell you that Google has worked hard in the last 18 months to implement IPv6 in parallel with IPv4 for all of our products and services that are reachable online. I want to switch gears now and talk about broadband because that is a major consideration today, especially in the course of the recovery efforts that are underway. Specifically, I want to say that the definition of broadband, first of all, it has to be more than 200 kilobits a second. My preference for broadband is 100 megabits a second and up. But more importantly, the term broadband is sometimes not used to mean broadband access to internet. It's simply meant to be broadband transport. And here I think we have a very fundamental question to ask ourselves. In the past, we had something called the universal service, and the purpose of that was to assure that everybody could get telephone service. In the 21st century, I submit to you that the universal service that we want is broadband access to the internet, not simply broadband and not simply lots of television channels. The reason I believe that that's an important position to take is that I believe the flexibility of basic internet is so great that having lots of it around will stimulate new applications, new products and services. I would much rather see lots and lots of broadband internet carrying virtually any product or service, whether it's a video stream or an audio stream or all the usual applications that we currently run. The openness of that platform should generate a substantial amount of GDP improvement where new products, new services, and new companies and new jobs are created. I would much rather see that for national benefit rather than seeing a separation of broadband into two parts, an internet part and an other part. Now that may not maximize the benefits to specific companies providing broadband, and I understand that argument. But I guess if we're looking for a national policy that maximizes benefit for the entire country, I would rather see very, very high-speed internet services available everywhere, including the rural parts of the country. The last observation I want to make has to do with economics. We are in a period of time where the economics of digital information are transforming a lot of industries in the sense of interrupting their or interfering with their business models. The economics of paper, especially newsprint, was very, very attractive when cheap paper was produced in large quantity and could be distributed on a regular daily basis. The problem is that digital content can be distributed in a far more efficient way than any physical material. The consequence of that is that business models that were built around the economics of particular media have to be rethought. And it is a fairly major collision. The other example of this is the area of copyright. We all understand that the principal purpose behind copyright was to provide benefit to those creating intellectual property, and for a period of time. Some people will argue that the current copyright arrangements allow for a longer period of time than is necessary, but that's a debate that we could have. The more critical thing is that the control of copies was the basic way by which this copyright benefit has been conferred. Internet comes along, and it turns out to be a giant copying engine. If you look at the way the World Wide Web works, which is one of the flows around in the net, your browser goes out to a website and it copies a home file, copies a file, the home page of that destination host. It copies it and then it interprets it. So that we have this gigantic copying engine running, and it's in substantial conflict with the model of intellectual property protection that copyright has adopted for many, many years. The solution to the problem is not that we should eliminate the notion of protecting intellectual property or rewarding people for creating it, but we are going to have to step back and ask ourselves, in the context of this kind of digital distribution environment, what new models of copyright benefit can we invent? It may take the engineers and the lawyers and others, the legislators, to figure out new ways of compensating people for creating intellectual property. An example of the dam breaking in some respects is the presence of Larry Lessig's Creative Commons. Here is a clear expression of a broader range of choices to the creators of intellectual property than have been available in the past, because the past models have been bound to particular physical manifestations. So I think that we are going to see a number of business models having to be rethought and reconsidered, and maybe new businesses or old businesses reinvented in the context of an online broadband digital environment that the internet poses for us. So I'm going to stop there, and thank you very much for allowing me to interrupt all of the fun and games at the bar. I've been told that if people have questions, I'm compelled to respond to them, and I will do so if you wish, but I understand that I'm also standing between you and the networking that's been going on, so I'll leave it to my host, Phil Bond, to tell me whether we're going to do Q&A or whether you're back to drinking again.
Let's take some questions quickly. Anybody? Here's a grand opportunity.
By the way, I hate the idea of Q&A. It implies that I know all the answers, and I don't. So if you happen to have an answer that you'd like to offer, that'd be okay with me.